you can take the financial side of it and put it to one side as far as I'm concerned, because genuinely, when I see a business grow or I see a business doing something that they was unable to do beforehand, that's what gives me great pleasure.
I'm Robin Johnson, and this is Yours for the Making, and I'm joined by Mark Trapnell from Biesse.
That was my aspiration. Genuinely, when I left school, I wanted to become a long-distance lorry driver. From a sort of skilled mechanic at the time, working on heavy goods vehicles, into the woodworking industry. And that really defined and changed my drive and my life in a lot of ways. There was a company that was very local to us that were looking for apprentice heavy goods mechanics.
This show tells the story of the makers, the people that create things, whether it's in wood or metal, whether they're artists or musicians or chefs. It doesn't matter. I'm going to tell their story.
And this is it. And I've been doing it now for 4.5 years and absolutely loved it. Love seeing things being created, really.
I'm Robin Johnson, and this is Yours for the Making, and I'm joined by Mark Trapnell from Biesse. Biesse, the machine manufacturer that I'm a big fan of.
Thank you very much.
So, Mark, you look after sales for Biesse, but that doesn't define who you are. I know you've had quite a varied journey, and one of the reasons why we went with Biesse for most of our advanced machinery was because you knew how it worked for us. But it's an interesting story of how you kind of got into what you do now.
And sales in general, yeah.
Yeah, because that's not how you started, is it?
Absolutely not. No.
Where did it all start?
I think it's really, it's a real nice, for me, it's a nice story, like genuinely. When I was at school, my dad was a long distance lorry driver. That was my aspiration. Genuinely, when I left school, I wanted to become a long distance lorry driver. And as it happens, you can't drive a 40-ton truck when you're 16 years old. But when I left school, genuinely, there was a company that was very local to us that were looking for apprentice heavy goods mechanics. So I literally left school on the Friday, started work on the Monday at a company that took me on. And I think at the time it was a government initiative, the YTS scheme. And literally I was with this business for 3 years, learning engine rebuilds, breaking down gearbox systems. And at the end of my training, I'd gone to Leyland DAF in Marlow, and they'd taught me gearbox systems and braking systems and engines.
Wow, cool.
And, when you're young and you're looking to progress, I'd gone back to the company with, like, I've learned all of this now. Is there any chance of, giving me the opportunity to become a driver or any more money? And it was like, well, sorry, we can't do that at the moment. So a company had just moved from London to Andover, where I was based, a company which grew into a massive organisation. But at the time, it was very small. I think there were about 10 employees within the business. It was Ducal, the pine furniture manufacturers. And I remember going there in my oily overalls for an interview. And the general manager at the time said to me, what are you on at the moment? This is what we can match. And, within 2 weeks, I was a changed direction completely. So from a sort of skilled mechanic at the time, working on heavy goods vehicles, into the woodworking industry. And that really defined and changed my drive and my life in a lot of ways, so much so. So as I said, when I started with the business, Ducal, they'd recently moved from London to Andover. They started in the area with about 10 employees and they grew to 800. It was a large 800 employees. It was a large business. And I guess because I started at such an entry level where there were not so many people, anyone that was really interested and keen to learn, they really wanted to invest in. And I think even now, I look back at all of the years that I spent with them, and I started there in 1987 and went through to 2003. And every stage of my training and development within that business, they gave us training to suit that role. So rather than, and even when I got to a manager stage within the business, there was still development work going on. So that was a brilliant in many ways, it was the foundation of where I am today and what I'm doing today. I trained as a wood machinist, which was brilliant because it was at that time very basic machines: spindle molders, panel saws, planers, and it grew into very much more. The company grew and started buying Biesse equipment. So we were buying the Rovers when the Rovers first come out, very much point-to-point drilling machines, and a step forward from the Rye CNCs and that were there at the time, because they were very much run on G code, and you had to sort of know and program G code. Whereas then you started getting into more software that was enabling you to create and draw and point to point on machines. And like I said, so for me, it was great because I was a little bit mature than some of the people that had come into the business. When they asked me if I wanted to go to college and train again as a wood machinist, I was like, absolutely. We want to learn how these things are done. So myself and, I don't know, at the time, probably 5 others went from the business to Salisbury Technical College, which is where they run the local, wood machining city and guilds. And that was brilliant because you could say, we got trained exactly how the machines work, and that didn't actually show you the method. It showed you how to do things, but it didn't actually show you in a business sense how things would work. But the real nice thing about it was because I was a little bit mature in the way that things were, I took on everything that they threw at me. So every bit of piece that you wanted to machine and manufacture and do, I absolutely loved it. And the nice thing was because we were quite close to Salisbury Cathedral, actually just across the road from Salisbury Cathedral, we quite often got bits of architrave or skirting or something that they want matched up in oak. And it was really nice to be able to help and, set that up and machine those parts as well.
Do you go in there now and you're like, oh, I did that bit. I did that bit.
Yeah, no, I wish I did. But it was, a really, really nice grounding for that side of it. And I've done advanced city and guilds machining as well. So,
and that was kind of before CNC machinery had taken off. Though you're talking about proper wood machining, spindle
proper wood machining,
making profile cutters up.
Absolutely, the old White Hill blocks.
God,
yeah, exactly. But yes, that. But then obviously the business itself was growing. As I said, I think that Ducal, a pine furniture manufacturer, they ended up going in 2003. But the time that they were there, they were very, very forward in the way that they operated. Even now, I'll go in the current role, I'll go into businesses and see things and think, 25, 30 years ago, we were doing this and better then. There's some really nice companies that I get to go into now, absolutely, that are doing things really, really nice. But I think the one thing that I would take from all of it is that when you are a mass producing furniture manufacturer, it's genuinely all about the costs of component and knowing those costs and how that builds up into a cost of product and how that builds up into whether it's you're adding value or adding waste to a product. And I think all of those things are really, really good. And that's gone into my memory bank. And everywhere I go, if I think I can see a way of doing something better, easier, that's where I like to take things.
Yeah, nice. I mean, certainly you've helped us immensely. I remember the first time you pulled up outside, you said, "Oh yeah, with Biesse CNC," and I remember saying to you, "Oh, we're nowhere near that. We're never going to be at a point where we're looking at big CNC machines." And then I think it's probably a year later, you pop back in again and said, "Oh, maybe I think we're close." And then a couple of projects came through where I thought, "Oh, we'd really probably need a 5-axis CNC," and lo and behold, we've got one behind us now.
Yeah.
And then, funnily enough, the day that we were at the Daventry show and receiving our training for the CNC, an email got sent out about the
Some
X demo machines going on sale. So I
Yeah.
stood up. As soon as
I
the
know.
email came, I stood up, walked straight into the showroom, and said, "Right,
I'll have that one. Yeah,
and I'll
I'll
have
have that. I
So-
remember. Yeah, very.
And the two machines, like the sander behind you, the Viet, fantastic machine. It's only a small thing, two head, but revolutionized how we finish stuff. And the edge bander as well. It's, now we've got the machines, the veneer shop set up. The whole process, we're not a mass manufacturer.
Yeah.
We're not, our clients, it's a bit different. It's all about just achieving the best finish that we can possibly achieve. Luckily, the cost isn't necessarily so much of an issue, but it's more like how good the thing is, how good it looks. And for us to be able to, I think I showed you when we were putting on solid edgings on boards, and I had 5 guys doing it with masking tape and PVA glue.
Yeah.
One bit at a side, and then letting that dry, and then doing another side of the panel. And
it's really interesting because I guess, and I don't want to jump too far in front because I want to go through some of the other jobs that I've done to get to where I am. But it's really nice to be able to talk and see when you help someone and you help their business grow. That's what does it for me. You can take the financial side of it and put it to one side as far as I'm concerned, because genuinely, when I see a business grow, or I see a business doing something that they was unable to do beforehand, that's what gives me great pleasure. And also seeing, getting text messages come through at 11 o'clock at night from someone saying, look what I've achieved. It's great. That's the bit that actually makes my job fantastic.
Well, that separates you from a lot of people in sales. It's not just about driven by numbers or whatever. You're genuinely interested because you've got the background in it, in what people are doing, how they're doing it, and how you can help them. Whereas a lot of sales is like, right, you're a customer. How much can I make off you?
Yeah, no, I don't see it like that. And, maybe that's an age thing as much as anything else. I don't know, I just think that it's always been about, when I went through with Ducal, some of the things that we've done, and it's really, really nice. And there's some great people that if I didn't name about that mentored me when I was working at Ducal. One of the guys, a guy called Tony Schaefer, who's no longer with us, was probably one of the fundamental bosses that you can look back in your working life and go, do you know what? I really learned something from that guy. He was great. And there are many others. One of the things that I said we did, as once I'd gone through the working on the machines and running machines for a good period of time, I sort of got made to factory supervisor, which then gave me a working and managing people type of background, which was great, supervisory training and management training. And then when you start looking at statistics, we had a guy that came over from America, a guy called John Davies, who actually started training with the junior managers with statistical process control. So SPC, which is a really interesting topic to get onto for analysts, but it starts looking at all of the reasons and how things work. And again, with that really struck a chord with me. I absolutely loved it. And as I'd grown with the business, as I said, the business was growing exponentially around me. My dad was working for the business. My mum worked for the business. My brother worked for the business. So it was and we weren't the only sort of family that were working for the business at the time. It was growing and growing, and there were many others.
Half of Andover working there.
Absolutely, there were 2 big employers in Andover. I think it was Lloyd's TSB and Ducal, and you worked for one or the other. That's how it was. But the nice thing was, as I said, every stage that I grew within the business, they gave the development to go with it and match it. And I think in some cases, I've seen absolutely people that have either been made up through length of service, which I don't necessarily agree with, because just because they've been with the business 15 years, 20 years doesn't make them right for a different role. Or at least if they've not been developed into that role, it makes them not necessarily right. And I think that was always something that the company done. I was very fortunate enough to get involved with the training of new employees. So one of the things the company did was every month, anyone that had started with the business come on a big training day, 2 days, and they done timber technology. So I was involved with training timber technology, and I loved the history, and I loved knowing what we were producing and how we produced it, and the timbers we were buying and where we were buying them from, and that was great because I actually got involved in going to Finland and Sweden to actually help purchase the timber.
Wow, cool.
So you got to go to the sawmills and see Scandinavia and how the timber was actually felled and logged and brought over to us, really.
Wow.
So, we were buying a lot of material at the time. But again, that was an experience which sits with you, So not only did I get to go to all of these foreign countries when the machines were being bought, we were buying Weinig molders and going to Germany and, Italy. And so all over, really, Denmark, we had some Danish presses we were using, so got to go there. So I was traveling a lot with the company, getting involved with every machine purchase that was being made in some form, not necessarily as a decision maker, but as an input into why we were looking to buy the type of equipment. And that sort of sat with me. Training and supervision of staff, which sat with me, because that's something which is I think, out of all of the skills, probably the hardest skill. Like say, you can train process, you can train whatever, but to try and understand the human psyche and makeup and dealing with people was always going to be the hardest, uncontrollable. But that was really good. So learned a lot with that, and then got made unit manager. So looking after the wood mill, basically, it was running two shifts at the time. Lots of people, probably around 60 to 80 people at the time in this particular one unit. And again, great skills. And then I got asked to look after one of the assembly units as well. So something I'd never been involved with. So I'd always been on the machining side of it. Then got asked to go and look after one of the assembly units. And that's brilliant because you get to see all of the components that you've made actually going into producing furniture. And at the time, it was very much standalone people producing furniture on a bench. And then as the company grew and developed, they started going into flow line manufacturing. So it was literally you'd done one part, pushed it went onto a board, moved on to the next part of the assembly and next part of assembly, and ended up actually flow line manufacturing.
So one person would do the same process.
Yeah, move it on.
Did they, or did you, or did they find that was more productive then?
I think, like if you really look at the one-piece flow, at the end of the day, there's more furniture coming out the back end of the line completed. Mass production as a mass assembly works in some instances. But I think you have to sort of look and judge each bit on its own merit. But one-piece flow where product is actually going down gives you a product at the end of the line which is a sellable item, basically. And that was interesting because we did look at lots of ways of manufacturing at the time: cellular manufacturing, flow line manufacturing, as opposed to how things were being done. And at the time, they'd grown into about 10 different buildings, of which 4 or 5 were assembly units, 2 were machining units. So it was quite a lot of areas and people doing things to make the whole. It was like I said, I still look back at it now with fondness and say that was probably the best grounding that I'd had.
At that scale, I'd imagine that you're looking at increments of improvement of seconds. If you can do that component 10 seconds faster, then that's going to be a real benefit when you're working at that kind of scale.
And literally, there were people working on that. I can't say that I was working on it at that level, but definitely there were people within the business. And another person that I will mention from Ducal, and still fond friends now, a gentleman called Paul Wilshire, who later on played a part in my actually joining Biesse, which is
really?
a real, absolutely. So, so Paul worked for Ducal, done his wood machining training, basically went into the computer programming side of the business as opposed to where I was on the supervisory and management side of the business. So, but yeah, very key part in my woodworking career.
So then Ducal grew and grew and grew.
Grew.
Grew with it.
So basically, it was privately owned by by a gentleman called Jeffrey Wiseman, and I think obviously the business got sold off to Silent Night. Silent Night purchased the group, and I think genuinely through no fault of theirs or anything really, but I think pine had sort of run its day within the UK, and there was a lot of Eastern European oak products coming in, and they were coming in at a cheaper price than
oak furniture land and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, but like genuinely, it was one of the big killers for the pine industry. I think that's for sure.
So then it kind of ran its course. 2003.
It ran its course. So 2003, unfortunately, closed the doors. Big loss of employment within in the Andover area, and I guess everyone panics to start off with and think, this is a big loss of employment. There's not the scale of businesses around to support that number of people. But everyone goes and life goes on, and people find jobs, and it moves.
And what happened? What did you do after that then?
So I went to work for a window fenestration company, and it, again, for me, it was about manufacturing. And as I said, my whole roles have been in manufacturing and production management. And I'll never forget, because you go for the interviews, and I went for an interview, and the gentleman that was running the business at the time basically said to me, showed me around, and we sat down and we had the interview, and basically said, look, what do you think of the business, and what do you think of the factories? And I'd sort of was honest and said, I think there's no flow, and the machines are set up in the wrong order, and this is what it needs to. I think you'd get more out of it if you'd done it like this. Within a few months, I'd been taken on and given 3 months to get the machine moves done.
Wow!
So that was really, really nice. Good challenge, and a great business in Winchester, just outside of Winchester. And they were doing a lot of fenestration work for schools, private houses, but in aluminium. So it was not in timber, but in aluminium fenestration. They got me quite involved in health and safety. So I started getting involved very much with on-site inspections and going out and doing site surveys and all sorts, really. So again, slightly different, but always involved in manufacturing. So making sure that we were hitting deadlines, making sure that the product was going through. Yeah.
And how long were you there for?
I was there for just under 5 years, so 4.5 years. And again, like literally, it's funny, and it's something come up. Literally saw an advert for a company that was based in Salisbury, so slightly different direction to where I was based. But a company making solid surface sanitary ware.
Oh, okay.
So this is cast resin molds of product that were deemed as indestructible and anti-ligature to go into prisons and detention centres around the UK. So it was a really, really interesting, again, another interesting interview when you go in and you look around and you see how people are working. And at this time, people were casting quite heavy molds. Some of these casts were 35, 40 kilos, maybe heavier. And people were pouring and molding and doing this composite resin on their hands and knees, basically pouring resins and mixing bowls, and smell of styrene everywhere. It's quite interesting, and sticky floors. When you walk around, you're sort of walking around into a sticky environment. And yeah, so and lots of waste. One of my observations when walking around was the size of the skip in the yard, which was overflowing with product that didn't quite make the standard as it was. And again, that was lots of conversations, but I remember going through a process where things were changed because of that, reducing that waste. You know how much a waste skip is these days, probably £300, 400, maybe £500 to take a skip away. And when you think how much items were going into that skip at the time, I'm thinking, well, if we saved that money could be spent on other things within the factory to improve the way that we're working. And again, notably, two people that work for the company, one, a gentleman called Trevor Powell, another great mentor that I learned a lot of, and a consultant at the time called Paul Quinn, who I will remember with both fear and, like I say, he's one of these guys that actually shook things up and really made a difference. And I think you take those things with you. But he taught me the value of value stream mapping out a process, seeing how far things travel within a business. So when you're pushing things around, if you take a product and you take it right the way through the process, how far is it traveling? Is it value added or non-value added work that's being carried out? And then, like I say, for me, again, it was another skill set to learn and understand and take with me through other stages of what it is that I'm doing.
I suppose from an engineer's brain, those little things, those little increases in efficiency are, there's sort of thing that gets people like us excited, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, that is it. So, so I think that, again, all of the roles that I've done lead on to other bits, and you think, well, every role that you do, you can take something from it and go, actually, now I understand that, and I see the value in that. And I think the importance of understanding whether what we're doing is value added or non-value added work is key in whatever we do, and I got really quite heavily involved with lean and lean manufacturing and lean processes and understanding the difference between value added and non-value added. And when you start looking, I've had several conversations recently with people talking about wanting to lean the process, and automatically people are talking about, we need to go into the shop floor and lean it and 5S and carry out all of the nice things that done with lean. And I go, whoa, you need to stop, you need to slow down, because you need to get your input processes right first, because you can do all of this and it looks really nice and it is great. It is great. And if you get people buying into it, it's even better. But you need to get your processes feeding that right first, because if not, all you're doing is feeding that really nice factory with wrong information. People are having to remake stuff. They're not doing exactly what it is you want them to do. And I think that's really important, that when people talk about all of these things, they talk about starting at the right place.
So for someone that was, someone like myself, a small manufacturer, a small company, joinery, whatever, furniture, are there any key principles of the lean or just in time or 5Ss? Are there any key principles that one could sort of take away today and use as a looking glass on their own business?
I think absolutely. I mean, in every business, absolutely every business, you can look at the processes, because, like I said, it isn't just about tidying up and making things look nice. That absolutely helps. It helps for many reasons. It helps on health and safety front. It helps on the organisational front. So people need to find a tool. They know it's there and at hand. They're not having to hunt around and have the downtime for that. That's all good. But again, like I said, most importantly, how do you get your information? One, how are you receiving the information from the customer to you? And that might be sketchy, because you work with different designers, you work with architects supplying information in different ways. But sometimes, a little bit of a pushback to them and saying, look, this is how we would like to receive the information from you guys. Is there any way that you can do that? And if they were able to do that in that method, then suddenly you're receiving information in a way that's clearer to you. And certainly if you're using other people's packages, other people's software packages to then load that into Microvellum, IMOS, Cabinet Vision, whatever it is that you're using to pull that information through, you're actually putting information into that in a better way, and the information coming out to the shop floor is coming out in a better way. I think that's great. A little bit more. So from Walgate, and I loved working there. It was a great company for many reasons. I need to say this and put a disclosure on it, but I think I've probably been in pretty much every prison in the UK. It's
just visiting, right?
just visiting. But it's a really experience to understand how systems work. And we done some work for a major tier 1 company, and just understanding how their processes work, and understand how for us as a small business to feed that process was really interesting.
We've had this conversation before, because I think we'd put in a tender for the same tier 1 company,
right?
And I think it was a godsend that we didn't win the tender, because when I looked at the terms, I mean, there was no way. As a small business, you couldn't survive on those terms. It was, I think it was like 90 days from the end of the month that you invoice was the payment terms, no deposit, and then a huge retention, and then the actual times that you could go there.
Yeah.
You couldn't be in a sign-written vehicle. You couldn't be in company clothes. You'd have to handle your phones and equipment and everything. You were checked. It basically, by the time you got through the gate to park up, I mean, from arrival to when you're first laying hands on whatever you're doing, it seemed like about a 3-hour process each way.
Yeah.
So you suddenly got 6 hours on top of your travel time taken out of your day. I mean, I might be exaggerating, but when we were talking about it, because we were down to the last 2, when we were talking about it, I was like, geez, I haven't priced for this. This is wild.
And I think, like, it is one of those cases where you think you're on a really good contract because it's a long-term contract. You've got work coming in, and then you realize, like you say, all of the things that you have to have. And I mean, we were producing sanitary ware at a hell of a rate, and this is not standard, porcelain molded WCs. This is resin cast product, which was some serious work involved in doing it, and weight. And we had to have a certain number always on site, on standby with ourselves, so much on site with them, and it was a real daily feed. But again, it's an experience. It's an experience, and I think that's good. So again, manufacturing process, inputs, outputs, learning and understanding what the customer wants and how they need it, how it's going to be supplied.
This is where a lot of people, certainly from my experience, and I was one of these people when I first started off, I started my business because I wanted to make things. I love making things, and people like buying the things. Some people like buying the things that I made, or as part of a wider service of doing, the renovation work, whatever. I was doing that to facilitate the actual making side of stuff. But what I had no idea of for probably the first 10 years of business was the inefficiency of making stuff, the inefficiency of the production, of how we were doing it and where the machines were placed and how the materials coming in, the inefficiency of the process. The process, like you said, from design concept to, my guys actually making it, or me at the time making it, this huge step. And it was all stuff that I didn't really have any idea about. And I think the only way I've learned it is through trial and error, and maybe seeing what other people do a little bit and trying to take from that what I can.
Yeah.
But I didn't go and work somewhere that kind of trained me. And I really wish I had. I was a school teacher before I started and before that I was a surf coach. So the skills that I'd learned was more in maybe managing people, but instructing and teaching.
Yeah.
And that really didn't have much crossover into what I was actually, all that I was teaching DT design and making. I knew about designing and making stuff, but it didn't really have much crossover with, running a business. And there's so much to be said, I think, for working somewhere good that will train you and develop you as a person, because you'll stay there for longer, but then when it's over, you've got some other skills that you can transfer elsewhere.
I think that in itself was good. So I'd had a good grounding of manufacturing right the way through, from small components to large components. And at Ducal days, we'd set up a machine in the morning and it'd still be running the same product at the end of the day. That's how many components were being run of this type of thing. So that was that. So and then I'd gone on to the senior management team of the businesses. So you start understanding a little bit more about profit and loss and bottom line and margins and sales processes. And, they could be quite frightening sometimes to someone who not been exposed to that. But again, from a learning point of view, for me and for knowledge to take forward, it was really important to understand how all of these things meshed together, how other departments, how the sales process worked, because at that time, sales were manufacturing's worst nemesis, because they were just looking to sell whatever, and you'd have to try and make it at the right price and to hit the deadline. And sometimes that was always a challenge, because, I always say this, I think in manufacturing is probably the worst of it all, because you're juggling materials, and sometimes materials turn up late or they're not right. You're managing machines and machinery and equipment, and making sure that you're balancing and making sure that you're, you've got capacity and everything else. But worse off, you're managing people, and that's always the hard one, because, if you're in a big organization, it still has an impact. But in reality, you can potentially move things around and cover. When you're in a small business and there's only, 10 people, one person being off has a massive impact. And if they ring up and they're not available, it's sometimes more of a challenge to cover that. But so it was really nice. So I worked for them, and I worked for them for just under 5 years again, and they grew in size and really made some nice product. And then I went to work for a company called Millbrook Furniture, and they were very eclectic in what they were producing at the time. So Millbrook was known for its beds. So we were producing bed frames and mattresses within one part of the organisation, and the part that I was working in was doing furniture, and we were making cabinets for Sunseeker yachts and all sorts of things. Really, we had the door for number 10 on standby. So 10 down the street, we had a door that was there ready to go. So if anything happened, they were doing it. The door was ready to be shipped up and go in. You look at life and you think, how did I end up here? But I remember genuinely, we won a contract to refurbish the House of Lords benches. So all of the benches in the House of Lords that were, oak and red leather, we had to go and bring back at a time. So this is from House of Parliament down to Totton in Southampton, where we were producing. And I got involved with writing the method statement of how we would go in and remove each bench at a time, take it down the Monarch stairway onto a lorry, and literally you weren't allowed to roller these. They weren't allowed to roller the product across the floor because of tiled flooring, and so it was a really, really interesting job that we had to create method statements and risk assessments and how we were going to do it. And it basically meant 6 people coming in with strops and lifting this bench and walking it all the way through the chambers to get it out onto a vehicle, get it back down, strip them right back down, all the horsehair and scrim and everything, and put them back together, renovate them and send them back up. So it's just another experience in life that you think, how did I end up in the House of Lords, doing this renovation?
That's pretty fun, though.
It is great. It was a really, again, another key learning experience that you think you take them with you, don't you?
So then what was the jump between there and Biesse, where you are now?
So one more step. So just showing you how old I am, really, in the number of jobs that I've actually had. But I spent again just about 4 years there working for that business. Then went to Stanner in Andover, which is Stanner Lifts, global lift company. Again, 6th generation of family business. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. Absolutely loved my time there. Actually, went there as a production engineer. So literally the company were looking to launch a couple of new products, and I was involved in looking at design drawings. So making sure they were fit for manufacture, really. So drawings would come down to us and it would be make or buy decisions. And again, an absolute another learning experience for me, because engineering tolerances versus woodworking tolerances, completely different. Obviously the decimal point and how many zeros afterwards you go to when you're talking engineering tolerances was considerable. But realizing that whatever size business you're working in, you get some designers that understand design for manufacture. You get other designers that perhaps need to understand that the capabilities of what it is you're looking for and why you're looking for it. And don't get me wrong, in the lift industry, tolerances and have to be maintained and controlled. But sometimes some of the product that you're making, you can look at it and go, we don't have the equipment to measure this, let alone produce it. So if we're going to do it this way, it needs to go out to be made. If it goes out to be made, you lose control of all of the things, the time scale, you lose control of, the scrap factors, you lose control of everything. So the cost then goes up on that product. So that was a good learning experience. Really, really good. And that sort of leads me on to Biesse, really. So as I said, we touched on a colleague and a friend, Paul Wilshire. Paul, at the time, was a brand manager for Biesse. He'd gone through his career working at different places and ended up at Biesse. And he'd sort of phoned me one day out of the blue and said, do you fancy doing something different? And I said, well, what do you want? And he said, well, have you thought about sales before? And it's really interesting because in all my manufacturing years, I'd never really thought about sales, only in as much as that they were the enemy. But my wife had said quite often on many occasions, have you thought about going into sales? You should be doing that. And I said, no, I haven't. But then I did. And literally, like he said, I'd said to Paul, sorry, I've not sold anything. He said, no, but you've run factories, you've run machinery and equipment, you've set up factories, you've bought equipment, either you've bought it or you've bought it as part of a decision-making team. And that's what we're looking for. And right, give it a go. And this is it. And I've been doing it now for 4.5 years and absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. And I think partly because it's selling something that I have a passion about, and the woodworking industry has been in me, and I absolutely love it. Love the different materials that get used. Just love seeing things being created, really.
And I bet you get to see the whole spectrum, really. Maybe not one man in his shed sort of outfits, but certainly from little businesses like mine all the way up to 800,000 employee manufacturers.
Yeah, I mean, it is really, really interesting, and it is such. What's really nice about it is that you get caught off guard sometimes. You go into places and you see things, and you think, wow, that is really special. People are doing things that are making other people's lives so much better. But you say about the size of businesses, we literally go from a one-man band who's got a CNC in a garage, not much more than the garage, right the way up to the larger businesses where they're running systems and lines. It's really, really interesting. And for me, again, with Biesse, I started with an area, and you start learning and you understand I think probably the most important thing is you understand that customers are what it's all about, and building that relationship with customers. And I think I'm going to say, and I genuinely, this is something I would say, and you can edit this or whatever, please. There was a guy that looked after an area, a guy called Charles Smith, and he was a HOMAG salesperson. I've never met him, but I hear so much about him. I genuinely hear wherever I go the relationship, and I hear people say it was really good, really understood what people needed, and I think to myself, that's what I want to be. If I'm doing this job in sales, I want to be that person that someone says, go to Mark, because you're going to get, the right answer, or you're going to get told whether we can do it or whether we can't do it. The real about it,
But you're coming at it from a perspective of having looked at and analysed production lines and manufacturing. So like you did with me, you came in and said, well, yeah, you might not be ready for it, but actually when you are, this machine probably, one of our smaller machines, we can do this, we can do that. So you can have two things on one machine, because in your head, you'd already gone through what I needed, and you were probably right. This is probably the machine that I needed, because you've looked at what I'm doing, what I want to do, and then you've applied all your knowledge and experience into going, right, that's probably the best thing. And that's not the most expensive, because other reps would go, yeah, what you need is the super duper 1000 that costs £5 million, because that'll revolutionise what you're doing. But that's not what you did. You kind of started me in the right position with the right tooling and equipment and everything, and we worked through a process to to test on that chair back, is this machine actually going to do the thing that we want it to do? Yeah, great, do a couple.
I think that was a brilliant challenge as well, from both ways. That was something which was a little bit unique. A nice example of being able to eventually demonstrate what it is that you were trying to achieve, and that was real good.
Yeah, it worked.
I really enjoyed it.
It worked well both ways, because we've been making blanks up to take up to the tech centre, so you can demo up there and show. Yeah. I think really that component is one of the hardest components we've ever made so far, anyway. But it's a good thing to be able to show people, how the machine can cut what it can cut.
I think, like I say, for me, that is, I would far more walk away from a sale than sell someone the wrong piece of equipment. If I genuinely didn't think that it would work for them, then I would much rather go, sorry, we've got nothing on this occasion. And I think that's something which probably is stands you in good stead as well.
Biesse as a company, I obviously follow them on LinkedIn and stuff like that. It seems to be there's a bit of a pivot going on from traditionally only woodworking, really, to now looking at different materials, stone and glass.
And advanced materials. So over the last couple of years, there's been a change, and you will see, like I say, the branding of the business has changed. So back from its 1969 roots, where it started, and the woodworking machines, you're absolutely right. Like I say, over the last couple of years, we've been involved in other materials, but it's now going into their own individual brands, where you can actually sort of see the color changes, the machine name changes, where you'll actually sort of start seeing. But yeah, so Biesse absolutely does glass, stone, advanced materials, and metals now. So it has definitely evolved into where it is today, really.
And in your role as kind of the area sales manager, are you involved in selling the other material stuff, or you just stick it to the wood?
No, absolutely. So predominantly wood, absolutely. But advanced materials, we are becoming more involved with. There are sales guys that are also involved in the glass and the stone that have got more technical capabilities in that area. But certainly advanced materials, we're talking some plastics and carbon fibers, and there is some crossover between woodworking machines and advanced material machines. So the knowledge that we have is there for the basic machines, understanding, and it's really, really interesting, because I was recently in Germany, in Dusseldorf, for a big show called the K Show, which is advanced materials, plastics, and what have you. And one of my colleagues from Spain was actually explaining to me the absolute number of different types of plastic. He said, "You think you got it bad on wood, and understanding wood machining." He said, when you go into plastics, you're probably looking at about 1,000 different plastics.
Really?
And each of them come with their own properties and machining capabilities and whatever. So yes, that I am involved and do get involved in the advanced material range of equipment as well. But every day's a learning day, and you're learning and seeing things, different types of machining. I love it.
And is the programming and stuff, I know Biesse, we use the B Solid software and stuff, but say if me or another manufacturer does joinery, thought, oh, we could do maybe stone, we could do, the marble for the bar tops and stuff like that. Or if we were a kitchen manufacturer and we were doing kitchens, we could offer, stone surfaces or whatever. Do you think it's a smart move for someone, in my position or similar, maybe bigger, to investigate possibility of doing stone? Or do you think that stone manufacturers probably should just be its own thing?
No, absolutely. I think that we are seeing a lot more cabinet makers, big kitchen companies that are using stone tops, investigating the machinery and equipment now, because I think there is definitely a crossover, and I think there is definitely a requirement, and people are looking at it. So if they can do it in-house, this is the big thing. I think it's like, say, we haven't really touched on it, but skill sets and labor is probably the one challenge that we've got within businesses, and many businesses today are looking at other means of producing, or how they can produce, because of the labor shortages or the skill shortages. And in some ways you could say, well, it is actually really quite sad that the skills are going. And I genuinely hope that we don't lose all of the skills, because I think, even for me, I think that having some of those skills and being able to cross transfer them into machinery is a real advantage. So if you have an understanding of how wood products go together, if you have an understanding of how wood machines, then it gives you an advantage when it comes to changing over. But certainly on the stone and glass machines, like I said, there is some cross transference of product, basically, and having the skill set to do that.
The software's fairly similar, I guess.
It is similar. It's slightly different. The language is slightly different, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's program, and it depends on where you're pulling the information from. People are using third-party softwares to come in, bring information in, but it's certainly not beyond the wits of man to do it.
Fair enough. And if I was like I was a few years ago, if I had a small business and I was looking at getting my first big machine purchase, someone in my position a few years ago, what advice would you give them?
Definitely, for me personally, and again, what I'd like to do is, I think that in some ways we act as consultants, whether we think we are, whether we don't. And the best information we can get is to lay all of the cards on the table at that time, because having a machine is one small part of that process, isn't it? Because you've had to outlay for extraction, more power to the building, all of the things that you have to consider, tooling, and I always say tooling is absolutely key. You buy a £150,000 machine, and if you put cheap tooling on it, you're going to end up with a result, not necessarily the best result. And I'm not saying it has to be the most expensive tooling, but you just have to realize that's a touch point. That's a bit that's actually creating the process. So I think that you have to look at the whole lot. You have to look at, what does the building require for a piece of machinery and equipment to go into it? What skill sets do I need to have in the business that I can then use to train and learn that piece of equipment? Do you have someone that's got because I always think, probably old school, but I always think that attitude in many cases outweigh some skill sets. You need, if you've got someone that absolutely wants to do it and wants to do a good job and wants to learn, they're going to be absolutely key to you going forward. And, the training and development, wanting to take it on and wanting to learn it and wanting to understand how things can move forward. I've had challenges in the past where people, absolutely qualified, skilled bench joiners or whatever have seen it as a threat because, machinery's coming in and is it going to change what I do or my job or everything? And I say it should never do that. It should always be a complement to the role. And when you get that balance and you get it right and you get the guys that have been doing the job for 20, 30 years that are really, really skilled, and they come to you and say, couldn't just do this. Couldn't just change this by this because it's going to make our life so much easier. That's when you've got the balance right. That's when you've got the balance and harmony of the machine and your skilled workers.
That's what it's all about, isn't it?
That's what it's all
when you
about.
Get a machine singing and they're all singing, and the whole process is just streamlined.
I just seen some of the product that you've produced over the back there. Some really, really nice 5-axis CNC work, and I think to myself, to produce that manually,
no chance.
Well, it obviously can be done. But the challenges in doing that. So the skill in what you've done and created there is come from the modeling and the programming side of it. As opposed to someone on the bench running jigs and creating jigs to be able to create parts and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, that one component that you're looking at there, I think if you could make it as a repeatable process by hand, you'd be looking at probably in the region of about 5 or 6 jigs. 10 jigs probably. Yeah. You'd be looking at a day over the spindle, multiple head changes on the spindle, or at least cutter changes on the spindle. You'd be looking at a day of just changing and cutting on the spindle on the various different jigs, which is probably dangerous on a part that size as well. And it'd have to be a clamp jig as well, and then it'd be every size, moving the head up and down to make it a repeatable process. There'd be a load of risk as well. And those last final cuts on the fine parts, the bits that when you've done all the other work and you just do that last final cut, they're the ones that are probably going to go wrong because you've got less material to hold on to. So now we've got this, we don't even consider how you would do something like that on the spindle because it just wouldn't be worth doing. But that said, it might take us 2 days to get to the point where we've modelled it, drawn it, simulated it, programmed it on the machine and worked out the blank that we need to do and how it's going to be held on and all that. That's probably 2 or 3 days sometimes for one component.
It is a different skill set, like I said, and it's something where you're creating something in an office environment. Yes, obviously you can stand at the machine and program, but you're creating that model. Then the nice thing is the simulation, being able to simulate what you're doing, the timings it's going to take. So at the end of it, you actually sort of get that feeling of, okay, we know what we're up against now.
That's really good for pricing as well. Yeah. Although we would have to do the legroom to build the model, we can go, right, it's going to be 1 hour and 25 to cut that component, and we need 5 of those components to put it all together. So we can give a pretty accurate cost rather than the old wave a finger in the air.
That is one of the really, really nice parts of the Biesse software, that simulation feature. Really, really good.
Yeah, it looks really cool as well.
And I just say, looking at the machine in that you got, and it still hearts me back to the time when we were speaking about, whether pod and rail or flat table is right for a business, and the differences between the 2 machines and the reason why you would go for one over the other. And I remember going down the line of the CFT for you, the convertible flat table. So taking a pod and rail machine and being able to, create it and turn it into a flat table machine to give you that.
It's
the
brilliant.
best of both.
It's brilliant. I mean, it's a big machine, but it's brilliant. We can fit an 8x4 sheet on, which we do a lot of.
Yeah.
And then we've got the pod rail set up at the other end where we're doing, componentry stuff, probably no more than 4 foot long, a lot of the components we're cutting. And we can set up multiples of them to save a little bit of time. And then we can set up this end. While that end's cutting, we can come over here and set up the sheets. Then it can jump onto there. Not that we're probably working at that capacity at the moment, because we're still more often than not working on a drawing and then cutting that part and then evaluating it and then going back to the drawing. But I mean, there's certainly been times where we've been loading one side, loading the other, and doing a bit over there, bit over there, back over there, back over here. It's great when that's going, because you think, this is, it's working at capacity.
I've been coming in here a few years now, and it's been really, really encouraging to see how you've grown in that time. And for me, that's, again, like what I love about going into different businesses. You see things and you think, wow, you can see that they've really grasped it and they're taking it on and they're moving it forward. And that's always been, again, like I said, one of my drivers. My drivers is absolutely making sure that I'm trying to do the right for the business, and seeing when they do well, and you see the product they're producing, and you see, how they're doing things. You think, yeah, they've got it. They've got it.
We're trying. We're trying.
You're doing very well.
Want to get a couple more when we've got a bigger place. We get a couple more and really make it sing.
No, excellent.
One question I ask everyone, Mark, is what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Yeah. I would absolutely say, do not be frightened to grasp opportunity, because I think sometimes it comes in forms of different routes, and I've been I think I've been very fortunate. I think I've been fortunate because I've been not frightened to say, yeah, I'll have a go at that. I love people. I love speaking with people and understanding where people are and trying to get a background. But I would say 100%, don't be frightened to take that opportunity on and run with it. From my early days, training as a heavy goods mechanic, learning things and seeing things, taking some of those skills into going into the wood machining side of things, and all the way through my working life, I've taken something from the businesses that I've been at. I've been involved in manufacturing, in purchasing, like I said, and I think from all of those bits and pieces, you learn something, and you learn where you sit in a business, and you learn what value you're adding to the business. And I genuinely believe that that's how I see whatever I do. Am I adding value to a business, or am I adding cost to a business? If I feel that I'm adding cost to a business and it's not the right fit, if I go to a business and I think I'm adding something that they don't have, or that is adding to their, then that's great, and that's what I think. But absolutely, one thing, don't be frightened to take the opportunity. If something comes up, go for it.
That's really good advice. So, Mark, if people want to come to you for a wonderful Biesse machine, where can they find you, and where can they find out more about it?
Obviously, they can go onto the Biesse website and they can find. But I look after the southwest of England now. So mobile number is 07903 229 No, yeah, no. Look, like I said, I can be contacted by the Biesse website.
Perfect. So if you are thinking about entering the world of CNC, or even belt sanders, wire belt sanders, edge banding, all the good stuff that Biesse do, probably you're the best person to speak to. You can come in and tell them if they really need what they might want, or if there's something that might do the job better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where the advice comes. I think, genuine advice from experience, from seeing and using and understanding the equipment is a good thing. And absolutely adding, seeing whether that product, that piece of kit is going to add value to that business. And that's what I like.
Perfect. Well, Mark, thanks ever so much for coming in.
I
A
appreciate
real
it.
great insight into not just kind of your journey into what you're doing now, but also, thinking about leaning up manufacture, all that sort of stuff. It's been really interesting.
Look, and like I said, I'm available for that side of things. Even discussions, if it means it gives you a starting point, then that's where we're.
Well, when we've got the workshop of dreams, 50,000 square feet or whatever, I'll be giving you a call for sure.
Right. More than happy.
Thank
you very
Mark.
much.
Cheers.